Здесь как бы можно, короче, да? Нет, не короче. Нет, не может. Понял, что я понял. Понял. Да нет, за что? Ну да. Ладно, ничего, нормально. Не буду говорить. Ну вот это есть. Ну ладно, ну ладно, не ладно, не я говорю. Нет, нет, зачем? Зачем так говорить? Не надо. Да. Ну да. What possibly could be, what powerful could powerful, shame. Ну, дальше.
Welcome back everyone to Blackthorn Prod. I'm Noah. So I'm currently working on my first little commercial game called The Dreadful Whispers. It's a 2D puzzle platformer and I'm really proud of how it's turning out. Once it's done, it will easily be the best game I've ever made. And so this weekend, I was just thinking back of how many games I'd made before The Dreadful Whispers. The answer is 31. In my 2 years and a half making games, I've completed 31 using the Unity game engine. It's been such an incredible ride, and in this video, I wanted to quickly talk about each and every game I've ever made, what it's about, but more importantly, what working on it's taught me. I'll be going through these games in the exact order in which I made them. So hopefully this will inspire you and get you excited to make your own games, but also show you that making a great game does not come easily. It can take years and years of work. One thing is for sure, each and every game that I'll be showing here taught me something and made me a better developer. Without these games, I would have never been able to start or hope to finish the Dreadful Whispers, and I know that the Dreadful Whispers, though it's going to be my best game yet, will lead to something greater still. So if you're working on some ugly and buggy game right now, before feeling discouraged and wanting to quit, remind yourself that it's just a stepping stone, a massive learning experience leading to something greater. With that said, let's start diving into all these games. First of all, we have Midnight Fire. This is where my game dev journey with Unity began. For this project, I worked with my brother Liam, him doing all the programming in C# and me making all the art and animations. I'll never forget this game or the experience making it. During the 3 weeks developing this cute 3D top-down shooter, I learned so much, such as finishing projects and not giving up as soon as things get a bit hard. I started and quit dozens of projects before completing this one with my bro, and it felt so damn good. I was able to put to good use all those 3D modeling and animation skills I'd acquired with Autodesk Maya. It was awesome. Once the game complete, I played it every night for a month after school, trying to beat my high score. From then on, I was hooked and deeply in love with the world of game creation. Color Shooter was the next game I made with my brother Liam. Again, him as the programmer and me as the artist and animator. We both worked on the game's design and sound effects and stuff. This is a reflex, mind-twisting game where you need to shoot the correct colored projectile at the right enemy. So green projectiles kill green enemies, red projectiles kill red enemies, and so on. Again, we learned how to finish what we started, and both improved our game dev skills like crazy. Me with the art and Liam with code. More than 2 years later, I'm still really proud of the art and colors in this game. It's all very round, cute, and happy looking. Notice that I spent a good 2 years using Autodesk Maya before making this game. These modeling and art skills didn't just come out from nowhere. Okay, Raining Apocalypse. This is another small and simple 3D game made in Unity. But this is the first one I actually made completely on my own. You just control a cartoony soldier character that needs to dodge hazards. What did I learn here? Well, a truckload of C# programming. I was terrified of coding before this project, so making this game shattered my silly beliefs that I would never be able to program. So if you believe you can do something, be that great art, code, good game design, anything in life really, well, think again, because the truth is, you can. Surviving Hell. This is another 3D top-down shooter game that I made on my own. It tells the story of a little angel that was accidentally sent to hell instead of heaven. My goal was to make a bigger, better version of Midnight Fire. I thought the game was awesome when I completed it. It even had an epic boss fight and lots of cool enemies. Playing it now though, I can't help but cringe at the slow controls and over-complex rules. However, making this game taught me lots more about C# programming, and I had such a lot of fun designing this world. Round-a-Lot. This is the only game out of the 31 games I've completed that you can't play sadly. For some reason I never uploaded it to itch.io. It's a mini open-world RPG where you kill goblins, rock monsters, and mushrooms, go on tiny quests and discover little secrets. I learned how to make simple dialogue systems, make different enemy AIs, and had the absolute joy of seeing people explore this world I'd created and uncover its secrets. The Vicious Cycle, my first local multiplayer game, basically plays like rock, paper, scissors, where the triangular character beats the spherical one, that in turn beats the cubic character, and so on. Again, I improved my programming skills and was really gaining in confidence. The Horizontal Kingdom. This was my very first 2D game, a weird tower defense experience full of chibi characters and monsters. I learned how to animate 2D characters using Unity, and how 2D collisions and sorting layers worked. And yeah, I realized that I enjoyed making 2D artwork more than 3D. There was something so simple, fun, and intuitive about drawing a character in Photoshop and then directly animating it. Instead of going through the task of modeling, UV mapping, texturing, rigging, and then animating for 3D, the enemies within, despite really liking 2D, I decided to make another 3D game because I wanted to create a first-person shooter. So that's what I did. It's an FPS set in the mind, where you blast at monsters that represent doubt, fear, and negativity. So obviously I learned how to make an FPS, and I also learned that making backups of your project is super important. After I lost about a week of progress when my PC unexpectedly crashed and some of my game's files went corrupt. This is also the first game with a more deep and interesting story. From then on, I tried to have all my games tell some kind of interesting or personal story, because it's a lot of fun and helps me as a developer design the world and make the arts. Towards Better is a brutal 2D platformer which I made on my dad's Mac on a holiday in the mountains. The controls don't feel that good and some levels are incredibly punishing, but it was one of my first experiences designing levels for a platformer game, and I was also reminded that you don't need that much to
Похоже,
make
школьник сейчас, прикинь, а? Смешно,
a game. You don't need a super powerful
Ну, по крайней мере,
computer,
был.
a drawing tablet,
Yandex.
lots of expensive softwares, a massive team of talented programmers,
Не знаю.
artists and musicians, just
тоже
one
нет, наверное.
computer and Unity. That's all that you need. And of course a strong desire to bring your imagination to life. So here comes Bring Your Imagination to Life, a 2D platformer made with my brother who during his summer holiday break returns to the world of game dev. It's a relaxing game where you just turn static grey sketches to life with a paintbrush. I learned a lot about 2D art and game animation with this project. Beneath the Skin, it's the first game that isn't supposed to be fun or challenging, but is purely about the story of a geeky boy that can see past the layers of skin and see people's insides, like their brain or beating hearts. It's weird and was fun to make. You can analyze the twisted meaning behind it if you want. But notice that at this point I was using the sprite mask to hide and show certain parts of the sprite, which happens to be the same technique I'm using more than a year later for my current game, The Dreadful Whispers.
А ведь мечтала стать дизайнером.
С онлайн-курсами Geekbrains вы сможете сделать хобби своей профессией. За год вы обучитесь веб-дизайну, создадите 5 проектов, оформите портфолио и резюме, а мы поможем найти работу по новой профессии.
Забавно. Забудь.
Хотите подарить родителям достойную старость, а не смотреть, как они выживают на нищенскую пенсию? Если это не про вас, пропустите.
Be Yourself, my first ever game jam game. For those who don't know, game jams are events where developers need to make
Все
a
как бы
game
принижать, то есть занятие такое прикольное, у тебя занятие.
in a very short period of time and around a given theme. Not only did I test my game dev skills to their very limits by making this game in under 48 hours, but it was also the very
Давай
first
тогда
time that
удалим
a
это,
game of
тебе
mine
у тебя
was
муравейник
played by
выделяет
people
пенсию,
other than
понятно.
family and friends.
Ну,
Thanks to
понятно,
the
все только
amazing
себе
Ladamdari game jam community, I got
А все
tons
ты
of
себя прокормил,
reviews
тебе
and
теперь надо.
feedback, which was not only super motivating, but also helped me improve
Живешь в помещении.
their skills to their very limits by making this game in under 48 hours. It was also the very first time that a game of mine was played by people other than family and friends. Thanks to the amazing Ladamdari Game Jam community, I got tons of reviews and feedback, which was not only super motivating, but also helped me improve as a developer. I started to feel part of a community, and I loved it. The Fire of Belief, my biggest and most ambitious game up until that point. It's a local multiplayer top-down shooter set in the mines, where you meet and defeat dozens of horrifying monsters. The game is way too difficult, and the mechanic of moving and shooting at the same time is a bit quirky. But oh boy did I learn so much making this game. For me, it was a huge project. Never had I made so many bosses, enemies, friendly companions and secrets. It was also a roguelike, meaning that the world was randomly generated every time you played. Such a massive programming challenge. The game is very flawed, but the experience making it was one of the best I've ever lived. I also made a whole devlog about it on my channel, so I had this small community motivating me and giving me a lot of feedback. So that was also a big learning experience, building an audience, a passionate player base that you know for sure will play the game when it comes out. They have no choice. This is a quote-unquote walking simulator with a soft, cute art style.
Чекидамка. Quote-unquote. Ну нет, продолжи, ну нет, ну вот это есть не самое. Ой, это вот, ой, вот это вот не надо. Да, вот насчет там вот этих всех штучек, никто этого не знает. Я, ну да. Да, типа того, я тебе ничего нового не скажу, начинаю. Не может это. Жизнь как Кот. Смотрите кота. Так. Собаку чаешь?
It's about a character that is supposed to be the evil boss of the game, but who doesn't want to be. It's very meta and fourth wall breaking, and I believe I improved my storytelling skills with this game. A puzzling combination, my second legendary game jam game made in 2 days. It's just a cute, colourful reflex game. The gameplay is very shallow and simple, but at this point I was getting a lot better at polishing my games. You know, making menus feel responsive and interesting, creating smooth scene transitions, adding little sound effects for every action the player takes, working on game juice with screen shake and particle effects. I began to fall in love with adding little details to my games that, when put together, make a big difference to the overall experience. He almost kills me, my next big project. It's a challenging 2D platformer about giving up, finishing things, and comparison. The game is again too difficult for most players, but again, I improved and learnt a lot about difficulty, balancing, and level layers. It almost kills me, my next big project. It's a challenging 2D platformer about giving up, finishing things, and comparison. The game is again too difficult for most players, but again, I improved and learnt a lot about difficulty, balancing, and level design. At this point in time, I was starting to compare everything I did to other people's games and art. And that was a very discouraging experience at times. I made this to try and purge those negative thoughts and habits from my mind, but also tell others that they're not alone struggling to finish things and comparing their failures or work in progress to other people's successes. I also started to learn how to work with someone other than my brother, in this case Eric Skarding, who made music for the game. Oh, and people made Let's Play videos. That was amazing. Coming up next is a series of mini games I made, each one created in 7 days for the weekly game jam. Hatchlings, a very simple game about risk and rewards. How long are you willing to blow on that egg to make it stronger, with the risk of it exploding at any moment? A Waffles Fate, a simple, endless runner that for some reason was front-paged on Newgrounds for a short period of time, that had a couple Let's Play videos made on it. It had some dark humor too. Blend in, a two-player game where one player needs to try and blend in with the AI and steal gold, whereas the other needs to spot that player amongst the AI bots and send him to prison. Inner, a very crappy little game I made, just me trying to make a whole game with frame-by-frame animation in Photoshop, instead of bone-based 2D animation in Unity, like I usually and still do. The Key, my first attempt at making a puzzle game. You can basically switch gravity. I'm quite proud of this little game, and designing the levels was a lot of fun. Mario Madness, another top-down shooter made with my brother. My goal here was to make the most gory game possible. I think I could make something a lot more gory now, but I guess I did a pretty good job at the time. Making these small games in a week taught me to prototype very fast, but also reminded me that making games is just a lot of fun. Before making these, I was beginning to put way too much pressure on myself. I wanted to make the next big thing, a massive game that loads of people would play and love. Making these games removes that pressure. It was okay if I messed up and made something completely crap. It was only made in a week after all, and I still enjoyed myself and learned something. Evolution. This was my third Ludum Game Jam game, so something I made in only 2 days. And it's one of the projects I am the most proud of, not only because of the arts, but also for the message it tries to tell. To this day, it's my game that got the most views and comments. It was actually the most rated game during Ludum 42, and ended up first in graphics, out of thousands of other games. That was a massive boost to my confidence as a game developer. This game will always hold a very special place in my heart for sure. The Link, another top-down shooter. I think I'm obsessed with making these. This was made for the GMTK Game Jam. You basically switch between two characters, each sharing the same life bar. It's pretty fun, and I'm happy with the cute art style. Haha, this was me trying to be funny. You just watch crude dancing characters and mustn't smile or laugh. I had a few good laughs working on this game. The Game Creation Recipe. This one was made for my own game jam, so in 7 days. It's a Zelda-like adventure where you defeat monsters, various bosses, and try and collect all the ingredients needed to make a game. It's also filled to the brim with secrets and Easter eggs. At this point, I'm starting to learn what it really means to be independent, to be an indie game developer. It means being able to add these kinds of secrets and Easter eggs without needing to justify why. It's being able to make whatever I want, when I want, and make games that are personal to me, or that I will have a lot of fun working on. And that realization is amazing.
Лучше плакать у психолога, чем смеяться у психиатра. Так говорит народная мудрость. Возможно, вы уже вспоминали с психологом прошлое, стояли в остановке, занимались другими помогающими практиками, но все еще не решили свой вопрос. Скорее всего, это связано с тем, что ваша проблема находится глубже. Может быть, где-то до момента рождения, а может быть, даже до момента начала этого воплощения в прошлой жизни. Специально для вас я записал видеоуроки, с помощью которых вы сможете...
Он понимает, как вот относиться к людям. То есть, где задокументировано, да, то есть это, ну, как бы, ну, уровень домыслов, так скажем, да, что-то такое, да, художественного вымысла, понимаю. Тебя что не... Ну. Ладно. Спам. Эффектовый рефлект. Дефектовый эффект. Эффектовый дефект. Эффектовый дефект. Дьянго. Дьянго. Перспективная жизнь. кто не знает. Кушать подано, хочется. Кушать. У нас другие за квартиру, да? Снимаем. Ой. Еще как запретно. День суеты, знаешь. Суеты. Кто, чё? Так не надо ничего. Так нет. И опять 25, и опять 2 часа. 2 часа утра уже. In Russian. Coordination. We know what we know. Нагулимо морингу, зустріни Богожіє. Нет, это жут же, наоборот. Опа. Нет. Так, 2 часа. Чего? Чесал? Не чесал, не чесал. Не чесал, а чесал. Не чесал. Ладно.
This was a small Halloween game I made in 2 days. that has a very unique mechanic where you can reveal a darker, more sinister world with this trail-like object. People loved it so much I knew I had to expand on this mechanic more, which led me to my current game project, The Dreadful Whispers. I'm telling you guys, each game I've ever made has led to something else. The skills I learned with one project helped me with another, or a story or character design or mechanic that I used in a game was maybe expanded on or reused in a later, better project. So again, don't feel bad about that buggy, bad game you're working on. It's going to lead you to something greater further down the line. Battling Madness. This is my fourth Ludum Game Jam game, made with another YouTuber called Saiku. Again, learning how to work with someone else was challenging but fun. When working on your own, like I do most of the time, you get used to not needing to justify what you do or agree with anyone. On the downside, you can miss out on a lot of fun and good times, as well as all that extra help that comes with having a teammate. Game dev can be lonely, so working with someone else makes it a lot less so. Please Player is another small game I made for that same Ludum Dare. I wanted to see how far the player would go to finish a game. Would he kill a poor old granny? Can be lonely. Or like I do most of the time, you get used to not needing to justify what you do or agree with anyone. On the downside, you can miss out on a lot of fun and good times, as the help that comes with having a teammate. Game dev can be lonely, so working with someone else makes it a lot less so. Please Player is another small game I made for that same Ludum Dare. I wanted to see how far the player would go to finish a game. Would he kill a poor old granny? Even a baby? Oh, and I also did lots of voice acting for the first time. That was really fun.
The player is insane. The player is insane.
Escaping Hearts, a game based on one of my favorite TV shows about moving two hearts through a series of vicious obstacles. I don't think I learned a huge amount working on this game, except that I had a good time and got a bit better at programming, finishing things and polishing. And finally, Tiny Planets, a game made for the second Blackthorn Prod Game Jam, all about stopping cute, cartoony planets from colliding with each other. Here I really tries to expand on a single mechanic the most possible by introducing throughout the game a large collection of different planets, each with a unique behavior. And those are my 31 games made so far. I've of course tried making tons of other games. Many never saw the light of day, and I share a few of those in this video. But now I'm working on my 32nd game, my first commercial project, The Dreadful Whispers. And as I said at the start of the video, it's going to be my best yet. So hopefully you found that interesting. You'll of course find links to play each and every game in the description of this video. The main takeaways here are each game you make is teaching you something. That buggy mess you made, be proud of it, because at least you finished and published it. And it taught you something for sure. And secondly, any amazing game you played is the result of a lot of hard work. Each developer you look up to has probably also made dozens of crappy or mediocre games. Failure is success in progress, and failures will teach you a lot, perhaps even more than your successes. And remember, if you're trying to make a game and you're failing or finding it super hard and frustrating, you're already miles in front of everyone that isn't even trying. Okay, thanks so much for watching, and an extra thank you to my patrons who support me financially, and to help me keep making videos and games. I won't be taking part in Ludum Dare coming up this weekend sadly, because I'm going to Copenhagen, where I intend to take part in the Nordic Game Jam. Their game devs will also make a game in 2 days around a given theme, so it should be tons of fun, and I hope to meet lots of cool devs over there. After that, back to work full time on The Dreadful Whispers, so stay tuned. Cheers.
Лодингу.
If there's one gameplay innovation that I think deserves another look, it's the Nemesis system, which first appeared in the 2014 game Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. At its most basic, it's a villain generator, capable of populating Mordor with a handful of procedurally generated bad guys. Each has a name, look, gameplay traits, and personality, which is revealed in taunting one-liners before combat.
I wonder which of us will kill you first!
But at its best, and especially so in the sequel Shadow of War, it's a full-on story generator, which is able to spin unique and highly personal narratives from your relationships with these orcs. It's a pretty incredible feat of design and engineering. We've seen story generation stuff in games like RimWorld and Crusader Kings, but in a real-time action game with blocks, it's unheard of. It's also something I've talked about a number of times on this channel, but I've never really dug into the specifics of how it works. To be honest, I've always been intimidated by the sheer complexity of the thing. That is, until now. It's about time I finally gave it a go. So, hi, I'm Mark Brown, this is Game Maker's Toolkit, and here's how the Nemesis system creates stories. A quick note before I start. To save time and make things easier, I'm mostly going to talk about these two games as a single entity, which I'll just call Mordor. It's worth noting that Shadow of War makes massive changes and improvements to the system, but the broad strokes do apply to both games. If I had to choose an analogy for the way Mordor tells stories, I'd go with improvisational theatre, where unscripted stories spontaneously evolve as the performance goes on, and especially the rule yes and, which is about always accepting your partner's prompt and building on it. And that's exactly how it works in Mordor. The player does something, the game recognises it, and builds on it. So you might run away from a battle with an orc captain to save your skin, and get called a coward in a future encounter.
Not letting you run this time! Oh, he's gonna finish it!
Or you might put a spy into the enemy's ranks, only for the next orc you meet to say,
We know you planted a spy. Don't know who he is yet, but we'll just torture maggots until we find him.
The way this works is that the game is always secretly cataloguing your interactions with the game, and the orcs can then reference this list in order to choose the most interesting line of dialogue at the start of your next encounter. And that's really clever, because it means the way you communicate to the game, the way you make your improvisational suggestions, is through the most basic actions of play. Things like kill, flee, injure, heal, or gather intel. The things you're doing anyway in order to play the game get used by the Nemesis system as a jumping off point for the narrative. But this can also go the other way, with the orcs giving prompts, and hopefully the player will take the bait and build on the story themselves. Take this Olog called Arcaro, who beat me to a pulp, bent down, picked up my sword, and broke it.
You think this hurts me? No!
I guess I'll be tracking him down. Okay, so that's the basics. But this left developer Monolith Productions with a problem. In a game that's all about death and violence, how do you make these stories last longer than a single encounter? You can't have improv if your partner is dead, after all. The solution was to find ways for an encounter to end that don't involve death. So, for one, the player is always able to run away from a battle, and is often encouraged to do so because it's difficult to recover health in the middle of combat. Some orcs also retreat when their life is in danger. Also, at the moment of death, it's possible for the encounter to go a very different way.
I can't go down like this! I won't go down like this!
A downed orc might defy death and have a tricky escape. Or if the player is about to die, the orc might decide to just humiliate them and walk away. Take Marku, a a wiry little archer who keeps downing me with his poisonous arrows, but always stops short of finishing the job.
Get up, man, Phil. I want a victory, not a mercy killing. It'll be too easy to kill you like this. Come on, tell me some Bride of Gondor or whatever you men are always going on about.
But even if Talion does actually die, that's not the end. In almost every game, the player's death is a non-canonical error that gets erased when you rewind to a previous save point. It's rare to find games where the player's demise is actually weaved into the narrative in an interesting way. But in Mordor, protagonist Talion is a grave walker, a man stuck between life and death, which gives him the power to endlessly come back to life, like someone respawning in a multiplayer match. And this allows for a key narrative trope: revenge.
I know why you want to kill me. Revenge! Revenge for sword!
Well, he won't be a problem anymore. Monolith says it was inspired by the Burnout games, where you can get wrecked by rival racers and then you're dropped straight back onto the track so you can hunt down that car and enact some sweet justice. It's only because crashing is not considered a failure in Burnout that this sort of story can happen. The studio was also inspired by the kill cam in Call of Duty games, where you get to see the person who just killed you and then can respawn into the map and hunt them down. In fact, a lot of Mordor's design was about trying to replicate multiplayer relatedness with computer-controlled characters. And it's not just Talion who can respawn. Every enemy you slay has a small chance to cheat death and reappear later in the game, perhaps with injuries, scars, and prosthetics, which is another chance for the game to reflect the player's actions back on them. Like, for example, maybe I was being a bit hasty when I said Arcaro the Swordbreaker wouldn't be a problem, because half an hour later, look who showed up in the middle of a fight.
I should thank you. Whatever magics you used when you took my head will not allow me to die. Getting killed by you was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Gulp. Put all of this together, plus some other possible outcomes that I'll speak about later, and we can see that there's many ways for the relationship between Talion and an orc to go forward, from humiliation to fleeing to cheating death. And so, whatever way the encounter ends, every time you meet this orc again, the process repeats, but now with a memory of your previous run-ins to reference and build the story further. Something else happens when an enemy kills you. They level up, they gain new strengths and shed old weaknesses, they get emboldened, and they often challenge a bigger orc for their position. You see, it would get boring if you just kept meeting the same orcs again and again without any change or growth in the relationship. So the Nemesis system needs some kind of framework for these stories to grow on. And in Mordor, Monolith used one that's familiar and easily understandable to anyone who's worked in a job or been in a prison gang: a hierarchy. In Shadow of War, every orc exists in a top-down organization of Overlord, a bunch of war chiefs, the captains, and the soldiers, who are just typical disposable